Welcome back to the Introduction to Psychopathy course. For this 7th lecture, we'll talk about the final facet of psychopathy, that of antisocial behaviour. After this lecture, you'll be able to demonstrate an understanding of the antisocial facet of psychopathy, describe how traits and behaviours which are associated with the antisocial facet manifest within forensic and community samples, and understand the importance of the additional sex-related items of the PCLR. Item 14. Poor behavioural controls. Here we see that psychopaths have inadequate behavioural controls. They are oftentimes short-tempered and take offence extremely easily. They are frequently angry and as children exhibited a history of tantrums. As adults and adolescences, they show the case study of assaults. In Lecture 8, when we talk about potential psychological, sociological, and biological mechanisms involved in the generation of psychopathic traits, we'll talk about the prefrontal cortex. So I'm just leaving you with this image for now, but we will return to this soon. Item 15. Early behavioural problems. Psychopaths show examples of early behavioural problems prior to the age of 13. Oftentimes they will have had contact with mental health and child psychological services. As a child they will have engaged in truancy and skipping school, or be suspended from schools with problems pertaining to aggression. As early adults they will have been arrested. A quote from an anonymous patient: "It was only schoolyard shenanigans. I had a couple of incidents of fisticuffs. Well, one time I broke the kid's arm. It was really distasteful. I was holding him down and putting excessive pressure on his arm, and it just snapped." So not only when psychopaths are explaining their behaviour, they're doing so in a callous way, completely disregarding the ultimate impact that they had on the victim of their offence. Think back to early items and see how all of these items intertwine. Item 16. Juvenile delinquency. Psychopaths frequently show charges and convictions between the ages of 10 and 17 years. This, however, does not include offences for which the person was not arrested, and as such it is likely that scores on the PCLR will be a lot smaller than the actual unit awarded. The scores are coded by seriousness, where higher scores are indicative of more serious offences. A piece of research by Geerlings et al. In 2020 shows a meta-analysis of 87 studies. A meta-analysis is where several studies are brought together and analysed as a whole to show patterns within the data. This meta-analysis explored relationships between juvenile delinquency and psychopathy. The key take-home finding here was that psychopathy moderately and positively was associated with juvenile delinquency, such that juvenile delinquency was greater in association with greater scores on psychopathy. However, importantly, the type of delinquency did not play a part in this relationship, and so it was only the amount of delinquency that was a factor here. Item 17. Revocation of conditional release. This item is scored in terms of psychopaths escaping from custody, or having violations of parole or probation, for example, drinking alcohol contrary to the licence conditions. Psychopaths may also fail to appear in court, or breach their court orders, for example, coming into contact with intimate partners after intimate partner violence, harassment, or stalking. Such individuals may also commit further offences whilst out on bail. A key case study to encapsulate this, and reference back to a few lectures earlier, is that of Charles Sabrage, who escaped after drugging the guards in the prison setting. You might also consider Ted Bundy, who escaped from a library whilst at a local jail. Item 18. Criminal versatility. Individuals have received charges and convictions as an adult, defined by being aged 18 years of age or older, for many different types of offences. The importance here is on the role of different offences, rather than the severity of the offending of a specific offence. Items 19 and 20. Promiscuous sexual behaviour and the role of many short-term marital relationships. Here, we see that a significant number of sexual partners increases one's propensity to score higher on the PCLR. These include impersonal or casual sexual relationships. Such individuals may have several relationships at once, thinking back to Mick Philpott, and also they may continue to engage in sexual offences or at least coercive sexual acts. Remember that these individuals are experts in manipulating people. Their behaviour may also rely on them using prostitutes or working as a prostitute. And this includes both heterosexual and homosexual relationships, a factor very prominent in the Ted Bundy case. Here is just a small example of individuals both in real life, celebrity psychopaths, and also in the media, which take on these promiscuous sexual behaviours. Activity 7. Now that you have been shown all 20 items which make up the PCLR, and have been given working examples from the media, film and real life, spend 10 to 15 minutes reflecting on these items, and try to identify the top 3 which concern you the most. Try to write down why you think they concern you. Compare these answers to those in Activity 3. Are there any differences? Each item is presented again on the next slide as a reminder, so feel free to pause the video there. That brings us to the end of Lecture 7. Throughout this lecture, we have discussed the 5 components which make up the antisocial facet of psychopathy: poor behavioural controls, early behavioural problems, juvenile delinquency, revocation of conditional release, and criminal versatility. We have also discussed the 2 additional components which add to the psychopathy rating of the PCLR. In Lecture 8, we'll move on to talk about the biopsychosocial model of psychopathy.